Welcome to chapter 2 of the book of 2 Kings. Elijah and Elisha begins, "It came to pass in the Lord to lead Elijah in a rumbling as into the heaven." So we're seeing here that this is going to happen. And this whole chapter, of course, prepares us for that event. And it says, it came to pass, apparently they knew somehow that this would happen. Other people did. Prophets, as we'll see. The Lord gave information to these people to what could be expected, a rumbling into heaven. And exactly what the rumbling was, it doesn't say until we get to that spot. But it says that Elijah and Elisha went from out of Gilgal, Elias, and Elisha. Now, remember now, Elias, the proper name is what they call is decline, have different endings depending on if it's a subject or the object of a sentence or possessive. Elias is the subject. Elian would be the object. The man went to Elian, or Elias went, and then it belonged to Eliu, the possessive. Apparently, from what I see, Elisha doesn't have the declensions. It's always Elisha. This is the way that it works, and I'm not exactly sure. I don't know Hebrew grammar that well to know the history of how this was all developed, because I don't really need to know, but just explaining why the difference in the Greek spellings. So they went from out of Gilgal. And Elijah said to Elisha, "Sit down in here, indeed here, for the Lord has sent me into Bethel." And Elisha said, "As the Lord lives and as your soul lives, shall I abandon you?" No. Now, whenever you see 1487, epsilon iota, it is shall within it's a question that requires a negative answer, no. I wanted to put no after whenever it appeared in the printed edition, but I didn't like doing that. Putting it in italics. I think I did in one of the editions, but a third edition, which I just finished the proofing of it today, a couple of hours ago, will not have a no, but it will have something in the introduction that will tell you whenever you see the E that it requires a negative answer generally when it's a question. So I abandon you? No. And they came unto Bethel, and that's fairly close to Jerusalem. And the sons of the prophets, the propheton derivative, came, the ones in Bethel came to Elisha, and they said to him, "Do you know that the Lord today takes your master above your head?" So they even knew somewhat how it's going to happen. And he said, "Well, indeed, even I knew. Keep silent." And Elijah said to Elisha, "Well, sit down indeed here, for the Lord has sent me to Jericho." And Elisha said, "As the Lord lives and as your soul lives, shall I abandon you?" Again, no. And they came into Jericho. That's right on the Jordan River, right north of the Dead Sea. And the sons of the prophets in Jericho approached to Elisha and said, to move it up here physically, to him, "Do you know that today the Lord takes your master from above your head?" And he said, "I knew. Keep silent." And Elijah said to him, "Well, sit down here indeed, for the Lord has sent me into the Jordan," close by. And Elisha said, "Well, As the Lord lives and as your soul lives, shall I abandon you again? And the no, shall I? No. And they both went. And 50 men from the sons of the prophets came, and they stood right opposite, far off. So here we got Elijah and Elisha at the Jordan River, and 50 men quite a ways away. They could see what's going on, but they were far off. And they stood, and both stood at the Jordan, Elisha and Elijah. And Elijah took his sheepskin, his covering coat, and wrapped it, and he struck the water, hits the water with his sheepskin, and the water was divided of the Jordan River here and there. And they both passed over through dry ground, just as Moses with the Red Sea, where the children of Israel passed through the dry ground. And it came to pass, in their passing over, Elijah said to Elisha, "Ask, what shall I do for you before my being taken up from you?" So he knew it was going up. And Elisha said, "Well, let there be indeed a double of your spirit upon me." Years ago, when I was at a mega church in Southern California called Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, the pastor, his name was Chuck Smith, when he read this part, when I first heard about it, I'm thinking, well, if Elijah is offered a double portion, what double portion would I like? And I thought about it, and I'm thinking, Lord, if you were to ask me, I would want a double portion of as much as that man, the pastor, knows about the Bible, twice as much. Now, whether I know twice as much or not, I'm not going to make any statement on that, but I feel that the prayer was answered for myself. And so then Elijah said, "You're hardened to ask." That's a hard thing to ask. "If you should behold me, being taken up from you, will be thus to you." Okay, well, that's what will happen. "But if not, in no way will it be." And it came to pass of their going and speaking that, behold, a chariot of fire and horses of fire, and they drew apart between both, and Elijah was taken up in a rumbling into the heaven. A chariot of fire. We have automobiles today that are Lamborghinis, Teslas, very powerful cars, and we have tanks and that are very powerful mechanical weapons, all of these things, but nothing I see compares to what we're seeing here. An armor, a chariot of fire, and horses of fire. Can you imagine seeing something like that? And they drew apart between both. And Elijah was taken up in a rumbling into the heaven. Now, he sat inside of the chariot. I would imagine he did. And all of a sudden, off it goes, up into heaven. Wow, what a way to go. And Elisha was beholding, and he yelled, "Pater, Pater!" The chariot, "Oh, Father, Father," paternal comes from that. "The chariot of Israel and his horsemen." And he did not see him any longer. And he took hold of his garments and tore them in two, ripped it apart, and he raised up high the sheepskin of Elijah, which fell on top of him. Apparently, as he was going, the sheepskin flew off of Elijah and landed on top of Elisha's head. And Elisha turned and stood upon the edge of the Jordan. He's looking now, he's got this sheepskin, pulls it off, and he took the sheepskin of Elijah, which fell on top of him, wipes it, and he struck the water. And he said, "Where is the God of Elijah now?" And he struck the waters, and they tore apart. here and there. And Elijah passed over the dry land back over into Israel. So, Israel proper, apparently. So, what Elijah said, if this happens, then you'll know that you will receive a double portion. So now we're going into the life of Elisha and see what kind of portions that God gave to him that was possibly beyond what Elijah experienced himself from God. And the sons of the prophets beheld him, the ones in Jericho, right opposite. They're fairly close. And they said, well, the spirit of Elijah rests upon Elisha. Pneuma, pneumatics, comes from that. And they came to meet with him, and they did obeisance to him upon the ground, like the Muslims do. They went face on the ground and bowing to a higher authority, and that was to show that they saw him as the higher authority. To them, he was the leader. Could be a general or a king, the head of a family, and so forth. Obeisance, as I mentioned many times, has been translated worship to King James and has nothing to do with music or instruments. And they, the prophets, said to him, behold, indeed, there are with your servants 50 men here, sons of power. In going, indeed, let them seek your master, lest at some time the Spirit of the Lord lifted him and tossed him in the mountains or upon one of the hills. And Elisha said, you shall not send. And they pressed him until he was shamed. Oh, come on, let us go. Let him go. Send him, made him feel bad. He said, send them. And they sent 50 men. And they sought 3 days, and they did not find him. And they returned to him, Elisha, and they stayed in Jericho. And he said to them, well, said I not to you, do not go? And the men of the city of Jericho apparently said to Elisha, behold now, the site of the city is good, as you see, O master. See, but the waters are bad, and the ground is barren. And Elisha said, well, bring to me a new water pot, and cast salt there. And they took it to him, and he went forth into the outlet of the waters, wherever that was, the Jordan, and he tossed there the salt. Then he said, now that would normally the salt you would think would make it bad, but he said, thus says the Lord, I have healed these waters. There will not be any longer there death and being barren. And the waters were healed until this day, whenever this was written later, according to the word of Elisha, which he spoke. And he ascended from there into Bethel, where he was before with Elijah. And in his ascending in the way, that small boys came forth from out of the city, and they mocked him and said to him, ascend, bald one, ascend, bald one. Well, this might be to somebody that is bald, can be very sensitive. Some people are not. I have a lot of hair, so I have always thanked God. I would not want to be bald. Most men don't want to be bald. But there has been some famous men who were bald. Yul Brynner and others, the guy that played Kojak, Telly Savalas, and these are going back on 20 or 30 years. I don't know about today. But a lot of men don't, some of them don't care. And other ones will put a, call it a rug, a wig, a toupee on, or they'll have hair transplants and so forth. Now myself, my mother was almost bald. She was 90 years old, and you could see her scalp completely, just these little gray hairs coming out of it. My dad was almost bald. My uncle was completely bald. And my grandfather was all bald. And here I am. Go figure. But I am what I am. And so apparently, Elisha was sensitive. Now, when when it says that they said this, ascend Baldwin, ascend Baldwin, he turned aside behind them, and he beheld them. He saw them, and he cursed them in the name of the Lord. And 2 bears came forth from out of the forest, and they tore asunder of them 40 and 2 children. Now, Chuck Smith, the church I mentioned that I went to, is bald. He went through the Bible just like I do here, going through, but he just did the King James. But whenever he came to this point, he was reading this, a big smile would come on his face, and 3,000 people in the audience would all laugh and roar because they knew he had a nice smile on his face that, these kids they're getting, well, nobody wants these children to be harmed, and I doubt if Elisha did either. But you have to be careful what you say, especially if you have power that comes from God. And if Jesus says, whoever you curse is cursed, and whoever you bless is blessed. And so if you curse somebody, you better be ready for the consequences of it. If it turns out really bad for you, then maybe you shouldn't have cursed somebody. Blessing it, I suppose there's nothing wrong with that. It's kind of hard to go wrong there. But so these children were mauled, and I doubt myself that Elisha wanted that to happen to them. Just because it says something like this, a story like this, doesn't mean it's good. There's a lot of bad things that happen in the Bible. But many people, especially when I was younger, I felt like, well, all these stories, everything that happened was good. It was right from God. But no, there's things people did that wasn't of God. So Elisha went from there to Mount Carmel, back up north, and from there he returned unto Samaria, where he was before, where Elijah was before. Next, chapter 3, a war against Moab, and we'll find out what that's all about if you join us in the next video seminar. Hope you do. God bless.